my friend.
The Out of Bounds Show is live from the Whiskey 61 Lounge in the Bank Plus studio.
Check it out.
Oh, man. Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Our guests join us on the Coors Light guest line. Coors Light, made to chill. Want to welcome you in on a Monday. WRKS 105.9 The Zone. ESPN. We welcome in Brad Everett's College Game Day on ESPN Radio. Brad, I'd like to start with the Auburn Tigers, the biggest enigma in SEC and college football. What do you make of what happened and what Auburn did to LSU on Saturday?
Well, you got to give Auburn a lot of credit because they had been just so up and down for the first few weeks, and then to put together a performance like that for 4 quarters, and I mean, it could have been worse, really. If you watch the game, Auburn certainly had a big opportunity where Seth Williams caught the ball down around the goal line, and then Derek Stingley made a great play to knock the ball out of his hands and into the end zone for a touchback where it looked like Auburn was about to score a touchdown there. So, look, they put it together offensively, and it looked great. We know LSU's defense is not great. But still, even against Ole Miss, Auburn, still was having difficulty being consistent on offense. So that part's big. Obviously, I think the bigger deal is the defense and how well it played for 4 quarters. And I realize it was a true freshman quarterback, but that quarterback and that offense had looked very good the week before against South Carolina, which is not a bad defensive team. So I think there's a lot to get excited about if you're Auburn. But for me personally, before I'm going to buy into this being who Auburn is and not just, the peak on the roller coaster, the highest point on the roller coaster, I want to see them play well 2 games in a row. So that to me is the big thing. We know what their ceiling is now. We know what they're capable of when they play well, when they put it all together. The question is, can they do that on a consistent basis, or are they going to go right back out again next time and look like they haven't figured out how to play this game?
Well, they get a week off and then they get Mississippi State, so there may be a disclaimer there.
Okay, well, all right. So, okay. But look, I mean, the rate that State's going, if you were to give up 14 points to them, then I think that's cause for concern, right? Like,
yes.
And now, I mean, State's defense is good enough that unless they just get to a point where they mail it in, then I wouldn't say it would be embarrassing if you only scored 20 on them. But I don't know. I think it's more about how they execute. It's you and I talked last week about how Auburn really lacked an identity on offense. It's like sometimes you're doing this, sometimes you're doing that, and you just like, what are you good at? And I think they've really found something in the running game, and they figured out what Bo Nix's role is in the running game, and I think they had a lot of success with that. We know they've got some weapons at receiver when they need to use them, but I think they've figured out that their strength is running the ball, and that's where it has to start. And so we'll see if they're able to sustain that.
When you look at your SEC power rankings, so you got Bama. And then really from there it gets real weird. I went Bama, Florida. Yeah, I know Florida's lost A&M. I still have Florida ahead of A&M. And if Florida doesn't lose anybody through the melee scuffle, whatever, from Saturday night, I like for Mullen to finally cash in the cocktail party. But give me your top 5, because I'm sitting here looking at mine, and I've got Bama, Florida, A&M, Auburn, and then Georgia, but I don't like what they're doing on offense. How do you see it, Brad?
Yeah, like if you're going to do power ratings based on how good you think the teams are right now, not not what have they done so far, not based on a resume. To me, power rating is about how good are you, which is a different thing from where do you deserve to be ranked. So I would start with Alabama, obviously. I probably would go with you with Florida. We finally got to see them for the first time in 3 weeks, and I think their offense is still going to be difficult for anyone to stop. And to me, that's the bigger deal right now in college football is how good is your offense as opposed to the defense, and that's why I would put Florida ahead of Georgia. The question is, would I put anyone else ahead of Georgia? At the moment, I would say no. I will go Florida and then Georgia, and then I think I would go with Auburn ahead of A&M. I think at its best, Auburn is better than A&M, and that's where I'll land for this week. The way that both of those teams go, I could see myself just going back and forth on that for a while until they play each other, which I think is the last game of the season. So yeah, it'll be it's close. It's close to me between those two teams, but I liked what I saw from A&M against Arkansas for the most part.
No kidding. I mean, what kind of orange juice did Jimbo Fisher have Saturday morning?
The thing is, if you really looked at Arkansas statistically, you could tell they're walking a tightrope. Like they have really relied on turnovers and a few big plays, and just overall their numbers, suggested that they still were probably one of the bottom four teams in the conference, even though they'd managed to win a couple and had a really good chance to beat Auburn. So they still have a long way to go. And I think A&M, by going out there and not making a lot of mistakes to make it easy for Arkansas.
Good point.
I think that was the thing, is that they executed on offense, and because of that, Arkansas just didn't have the talent to be able to hang in for 4 quarters.
Okay, so you would go Bama, Florida.
Yep.
A&M. No, I'm sorry, Auburn. You like Auburn better?
No, Georgia. I'm going to go Georgia.
Really?
First, and then yeah. I now.
But Brad, they're regressing on offense. I mean,
they're a little beat up right now on defense too, which is going to make this game on Saturday really interesting. In fact, I was thinking that this would be pretty close to a pick'em, on Saturday night, and then I saw yesterday Georgia's favored by like 6. Is that what the line opened at? Like.
Blake, you just had a 4.5, but it could be 4.5 to 6.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, like even more than a field goal. It's just that I would be surprised if it's not that down significantly, because I'm just guessing that most people throughout the week are going to be picking Florida to win the game. I could be wrong, but to me, recent history is the only reason to pick Georgia in this game. Just the fact that they've had Florida's number would be the only reason you would go in that direction based on what you've seen.
Right.
No, so I'm with you on the concerns over their offense, but
here's my deal.
It wasn't that long ago that they played Auburn. All right, and that was a one-sided game. So I don't. Look, Auburn would probably do better. They played again, but I don't think so much has changed that I would go the other way.
Okay. Brad
I'm not going to be held hostage by one game, by one Auburn performance against LSU, which LSU on defense is a total mess.
Oh yeah. Do you have something for Brad?
Well, I was going to ask Brad. We've had this conversation. Is Bo Pelini dead man walking at this point? Given what I know, LSU fans didn't expect to be undefeated, but good grief, they didn't expect to lose to Missouri, Auburn, and State through the first 6 games.
Right. Well, in the Auburn one, it was really not so much they lost to him, but just how embarrassing it was, the way that it played out. I don't know. We know that, 3 years ago, Matt Canada, was one and done at LSU. But I also felt like there was a big philosophical disconnect between him and Orgeron, whereas this year, Coach O brought in a guy to run exactly what he wanted to run on defense. And he was talking it up, in the off season, about how much he liked this D. He was even saying that they looked better than last year's defense in practice, and was pretty much throwing Dave Aranda under the bus. And I don't know. I think it'd be a really bad look for Coach O to get rid of a guy who basically came in and by his own words is pretty much running the defense that he wanted him to run. Now, I mean, I should say he wanted him to run. This is what Bo Pelini does, but that's the reason he's hired. He was hired because he runs the type of defense that Coach O likes. So if you've decided 5 games in that defense can't win in the SEC, that would suggest that Coach O, at least on that side of the ball, is kind of out of touch as to what it would take to win in the SEC. Well, obviously the guy knows how to win the conference because he did it last year. But that was from the offensive standpoint. I think he knows what it's going to take offensively to win. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes. We'll see if they're able to get anything go. The question is it Pelini or is it that particular system? And we'll have to wait and see. I mean, let's be honest. Look, they lost almost everybody from last year. This is an inexperienced defense, as many 4- and 5-star guys as they might have out there. And I think that you do have to balance the two when you're trying to figure out what's going wrong here. There's no excuse for them being as bad as they are, but I don't know that it's all scheme.
Okay, that's what people are debating, Brad. Is Orgeron Chizik, or is he something else, better than that can continue to modify and adjust? And Saban and Dabo, that's the moon to him. But you know what I mean.
Right.
No,
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I mean, and by the way, this is just one more example of just how amazing Saban has been, because you think of the number of times that he has had turnover at coordinator on both sides of the ball. And I wouldn't say that he's always made the home run hire, but what it is, he has an idea of what he wants to do, and he finds the guy who's going to do it that way and is going to be successful. And here's a case where Coach O had a good idea of what he wanted to do on defense. He went out and found a guy who did it, and it's been a disaster. Look, Dabo has not had a lot of turnover at coordinator, but when he has had to make a hire, he's made the right ones.
Right.
And so I think if Coach O is going to last, he's got to figure out a way to get this fixed. Now, whether that's getting rid of Pelini and bringing in someone else, or whether that's making sure that everyone's on the same page and maybe they have to tweak some stuff. I don't know what it is, but the feeling was with Chizik at Auburn. I mean, in hindsight, I'm not saying anyone was saying this at the end of the 2010 season, but in hindsight, everybody looks back and they're like, oh, you know what? Here's a coach who just had the right quarterback with the right coordinator, for the right season. So he had Cam Newton, who was the perfect fit in Gus Malzahn's offense, and it was magic for 1 year. And I think right now a lot of people are saying that might be what happened with Joe Burrow and Joe Brady. And time will tell. But offense, until this past Saturday, offense was not the problem for LSU. Defense is where they got to get it fixed.
All right, let's go to Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Brad Edwards, College Game Day on ESPN Radio, joining us on the Coors Light guest line, recapping the weekend. What do I do with Ole Miss? They're 2-4. They beat a below-average Kentucky team and an awful Vanderbilt team on one side of this 2-4. On the flip side, they have moved the ball at a very exciting and explosive rate, other than some speed bumps against Arkansas and Auburn. We kind of joke that it's the most excited 2-4 fan base in the country.
Yeah.
But what does Brad Edwards see?
Well, I see an offense that knows what it's doing. We talked about Auburn, and it's like, what's their identity? And I think they finally figured it out. maybe. We'll see the next time they play. But for Ole Miss, look, I give Kiffin a lot of credit for sticking with Corral, because there certainly have been opportunities where and obviously he did put him on the sideline for a little bit and put Plumlee in there. But he has an idea of what he wants to do with this offense and where he wants to be for the long term. And he believes that Corral is the type of quarterback he needs to do that. And so he keeps coming back to him. And so I think what you can take from that is that this is what the offense is going to be. This is the type of quarterback that he's going to be trying to recruit for the future. And as long as he's got the skill guys to make it work. And look, I think they should get better on the O-line, as he recruits better. And I think there's a lot to be excited about as far as that offense. And look, the defense can only get better too. So you're right that the record is not great, but they've been fun to watch. And I think as he gets better talent, they're just going to be more of a threat to more teams in that conference. And look, I think it'd be hard to say that they're not a threat to everyone in that conference already. I mean, considering what they did against Alabama, and what they did against Auburn. I mean, I don't know who's left out there on the schedule for them to play this year. I think they would have tested Florida more if they hadn't gotten them in the season opener. So yeah, I mean, they're good enough to scare anyone in that league already, and they're just going to get better and better. I think if you're looking at the state and what's happening within the state right now, my question, like I look at Mississippi State and I see the same opportunities for Mississippi State to get better on offense as they recruit, better players for what Leach wants to do. But the question I have with Leach that I don't have at all with Kiffin is, can he recruit those guys? I know Kiffin can go out there and recruit them to the SEC. Can Mike Leach do that? And I think that's going to determine what direction, this whole rivalry goes in the next few years, and whether it ends up being a lot of fun with a bunch of really high-scoring games or whether it ends up being totally one-sided.
Okay, well, let's walk through it. Brad Edwards, ESPN. Ole Miss takes a week off, and they host South Carolina, go to A&M, host Mississippi State, and go to LSU. They should, like you said, they should be in all those games and have an awesome opportunity to win 2, maybe 3-1.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. At this point, I'd be surprised if they lose the Egg Bowl. But the other ones, like I could see them going, 3-0 or 0-3. Like it's kind of what we've seen so far. And to tell you the truth, that's not that much different from the rest of the league. I mean, outside of Alabama, you get Alabama out of there, and I mean, I guess Florida's so good on offense and Georgia's so good on defense that the bottom teams in the league really have no chance against them. But for pretty much everyone else, I mean, and Vanderbilt's so bad they're not going to beat anybody. But I say that we'll see what happens with State. But they shouldn't be able to beat anybody. But then there's just not a lot separating the rest of those teams.
No.
I think that's one reason we've gotten so many good games so far, and I think we're just going to get a lot more. And by the way, that's not just an SEC thing. I'm seeing the same thing in other conferences across the country, where like in the Big Ten, like outside of Ohio State, like most of those teams look like there's not much separating them. Same thing in the ACC outside of Clemson. Even Clemson, ended up in a close game this past weekend without Trevor Lawrence in there. So who knows? I mean, it's just a weird year in college football where, everyone didn't get their normal prep, and I think we can see that a lot of unpredictable things are happening.
Blake, you have a question for Brad Edwards.
Yeah, I know, Brad, that the results right now are swayed to one side, but we had this conversation a little bit before the show, and we're going to continue to dive into it. Is Mike Leach's offense outdated to the point that there hasn't been an adaptation to his air raid? Because we've seen Kingsbury do it both at Texas Tech and Arizona. We're seeing what what Kiffin and his Baylor air raid style is. Has Mike Leach's air raid missed the window for success without adapting to the more modern air raid styles that we see at other schools?
Yeah, you're saying, does he need to tweak? There's no question with his offense that teams that are athletically superior and are pretty disciplined in the way that they defend have a lot of success against it. And that's why he just got shut down by Washington every year when he was at Washington State. And so I think that's your concern at Mississippi State, is because that there are a few teams in that league that you're never going to have more talent than. And so if the Alabamas, the LSUs, the Auburns, those types of teams, obviously Georgia and Florida on the other side when you play them, if they go out and play sound defensively, and everyone if you don't do what LSU did, right? Like if you know what you're doing and you execute it, then you're going to stop that offense. And that just seems to be the way that it is right now, because he's going to bring in better players to State, but he's not going to bring in, the best receiving core in the nation to Starkville like that. I mean, he can get better receivers. He can get good receivers, but he's not going to have, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle all running around. If he did, I think it'd still be difficult for anyone to stop. The talent's going to prevail, but that's the issue. That's the issue that he has, and that's where I think that maybe it does need some tweaking. Once he gets better players, should they be able to win a handful of games every year, be able to beat teams like Kentucky and whatever that they're struggling against right now, Arkansas, they should, but I think he's expected to do more than that, right?
Oh, yeah.
So
But the counter to that, Brad, is that Texas, Southern Cal, Oklahoma, and some of the teams that he has faced that out-recruited him by 30-something spots, that at times he was able to give them a lot of trouble.
He was. I think I would have to look back and see how much trouble did he give them on offense, like on a consistent basis? Because the thing, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, is that if it was just as simple as, okay, rush 3, drop 8, he would have been out of coaching a decade ago. Like, it's not as easy as everyone's made it look. I mean, part of this is because, you take Kylan Hill out of there, for one, it changes things, and then he doesn't have dynamic receivers. So that's part of it. I don't know. I think the SEC is a different animal than the Pac-12 and the Big 12 as far as the talent that he's going up against on defense.
All right, we'll leave it there. Brad Edwards, College Game Day on ESPN Radio. Real quick, Brad, do you like Florida or Georgia?
I like Florida.
Okay. Florida to you like MSU or Vandy?
I'm going to go with MSU because Vandy's just so bad. I just have a hard time believing State is that bad, but we'll see.
Have a good week, buddy.
All right, you too.
See you, man. Brad Edwards, College Game Day on ESPN Radio, joined us on the Coors Light guest line. The show is brought to you by Michael Oswalt with Tom Smith Land and Homes. If you're in the market for a hunting camp or fishing cabin, call 601-898-2772. Michael Oswalt, Tom Smith Land and